So we'll get started. I'm Lucy Brown. I'm the Deputy Director of the Florence Nightingale Foundation Academy, and part of my role is to host the wonderful webinar series. And we're absolutely thrilled to welcome Jacynth Ivey, who's been long associated with the foundation as one of our associates, and we're so fortunate to work with Jacynth. Jacynth is a phenomenal nurse, midwife and health visitor, but actually is a multi-award winning transformational leader. She's a coach, a speaker, just an absolute blazer of trails, and we're so fortunate to have Jacynth today to present on our business etiquette webinar. So just a few housekeeping before I hand across to Jacynth. We will be recording today, as we do all of our webinars, and they'll be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of days' time. So if you enjoyed it, please do share with your colleagues and let them know about the webinar. We really want to share it far and wide. It's open to all our alumni and all of our members. So do let us know. We're going to be asking for any questions. If you feel like you'd like to ask a question, either raise your hand or your virtual hand, or pop a question in the chat box and I can ask it on your behalf. If you don't feel brave enough to do that, we're happy to do that. But Jacynth, I'd say, really do use this opportunity. Jacynth is such a wealth of knowledge. We've been chatting just before we joined today, and I've learned so much already. So I would urge you to question her while we have Jacynth today. So I'm going to hand across to Jacynth. Thank you so much, Jacynth. We'll hand back at the end for some questions. So over to you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Lucy. And hello to every one of you. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for asking me. So yes, my name is Jacynth. And first of all, actually, as I said my name, it reminded me, I do say it slowly so that actually to hopefully help you to be able to pronounce my name. It's not the easiest in the world. So it's Jacynth. So yeah, I'm a nurse, midwife, trained as a midwife and a health visitor. All of my nursing career was spent in Birmingham. And I did, my last position in the NHS was as an executive director of nursing, so the equivalent of a chief nurse now. And as I was sharing earlier this week, I say that because it's quite significant, because at that time, there weren't very many people who looked like me in that position. So in the early 2000s, when I was an exec director of nursing, there were about 9, 10 of us. Fast forward 22 years, and does anybody know, put it in the chat if you know, does anybody know how many exec directors of nursing, chief nurses there are in England today? Anybody hazard a guess? Go and put it in the chat. Let's see if anybody's brave enough to quote a number. No, nobody wants to hazard a guess. 12, 50, don't know, maybe 500. Okay, 5, 600. Okay, the number is, wait for it, 17, 17. So that's how many exec directors of nursing we have from a Black, Asian, minority ethnic community today. So that's just a fact I thought I would just share with you. And what's interesting is perhaps when you go back to your work environments, is to kind of relook at the environment to kind of say, who's in those leadership positions? And how do we help more people to get into those positions? So I'm going to share my presentation with you. So today's session is on business etiquette. And just a little bit more about me. I say I'm on a mission to empower people to be the best that they can be. And I say that because we often have a feeling or a sense or a thought that we need to be like somebody else. In order to lead, we need to be exactly like this person, or we need to follow this manual. Or actually, what we really need to do is to live and connect with our true, authentic self, acknowledge how brilliant we are, and step into our power as leaders. And that's often my mantra when I'm working with individuals, when I'm working with teams, wherever you are on that career journey, it's really important that you live your true, authentic self. And as we go through this presentation, and as I start to talk to you about business etiquette, it's in that context that I'll be talking. And so people begin to evaluate us even before any word is spoken. This quote says, "Who you are speaks so loudly that I do not hear what you say." And you will already have formed an opinion of me, either before you attended this webinar, or indeed, certainly by now, you'll have formed an opinion of me. And which is your opinion, it's based on your perception. And whilst perceptions are not reality, they're ultimately the individual, what they base their truth on. And so this quote about "who you are speaks so loudly that I do not hear what you say" is quite true in terms of how people perceive you and how we put ourselves across. And we'll explore that a little bit more. And I will leave time for questions, please don't worry. So what is etiquette? We often hear that phrase, etiquette, and some people think it's a very old-fashioned term. And the definition says the customary code of polite behavior in society or among a particular profession or group. It also talks about a set of rules that govern the way that you interact with others, either in a business setting, when we think about how we interact with patients, with carers, with our communities, with contractors, with internal or external stakeholders. It's what are those set of rules? And they are not necessarily written. There isn't anywhere you can go and say, actually, this is how you need to behave, this is how you need to be. And it's about how you convey the right image and behave in an appropriate way. And when we think about that, and it's to what extent, when we start to think about how we are socialized. So when we think about our upbringing in the environments that we were brought up in, and what were the rules that were unwritten, the regulations, the way things were done in terms of what was expected of you, of how you behave and how you interact with others. And it's thinking back that far. What it's not is a definitive set of rules or a template that everybody must follow. Because as I said, it's about acknowledging the uniqueness of you. It's about acknowledging your authenticity within all of this. So it's not a set of rules. I'm not here saying that this is how you must behave, this is how you must dress, this is what you must do. And it's about what do you take out of this talk that A, is comfortable for you, but also B, stretches you a little bit. Because comfortable whilst can be good, but actually if we're thinking about growth, we're thinking about career moves, our next move, how we can improve, then we have to think about what else could we do, or how could we do things differently to how we are currently doing them. And so within the whole concept of, I'll just go back one, of thinking about what is etiquette. It talks about a set of rules that kind of govern the way people interact with each other. One of the things, and I'll keep coming back to it, is that we must also recognize is that there are cultural nuances. So maybe the way that I do things may not be the way, for example, that Lucy does something, yes, or that anybody else does something for a number of reasons. A, we are different people, but B, it might be we have a different cultural background, cultural upbringing, a different set of cultural beliefs and behaviors that are the norm within our different cultures. So that's really also important to remember, is the cultural nuances that are potentially there. So what it is, it's simply a means of maximizing, it talks about your business potential by presenting yourself favorably. It's a means of maximizing your career potential. It's a means of maximizing your impact Yes, your professional, personal and professional impact by the way that you present yourself in different situations and in different environments. So if you could just put in the chat, what do you think you need to consider in thinking about business etiquette? Yeah, what are some of the things that you think you might need to think about, that you might need to consider, that maybe you want to know a little bit more about? And if you pop that in the chat and see what we've got. So yes, how we dress, our appearance, around our clothing, hygiene, language, absolutely. There's some stuff coming through language. Other people's expectations and assumptions. Yep, definitely. Okay, so keep commenting, and I'm going to keep the chat open so that I can see those comments. Our age, okay, how we communicate, listen, encourage discussion, knowledgeable. And age is an interesting one because actually people's thoughts around this are different according to generation. And particularly when we start to think about dress, it is quite different across the generations. So yeah, tone of voice, getting your point across over in a non-aggressive way. Brilliant. Keep those coming, and we'll see how we get on. So why is it important, particularly when we're thinking about our career and thinking about our effectiveness at work? Builds strong relationships. One of the things that I constantly say is that every single thing that we do in life is premised on a relationship. Yes, if you go and buy, a pint of milk, it's premised on the relationship. Yes, our interactions with patients, our interactions with our managers, whatever it is, it's premised on a relationship. There's an exchange. It's you and another. And so that's really important around how we build strong relationships. Really important around how we build strong relationships. And I go back to that wonderful quote from Maya Angelou, which says, people will forget what you said, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that is premised on the relationship. And it doesn't take long at all. It's important to promote a positive atmosphere. That's linked to that relationship. That's linked to that quote around, when people have had an interaction with you, how do they feel as a result of that? What have you left them with? Because we leave a footprint. Wherever we go, whatever we do, we leave a footprint. And what is the footprint that you are leaving behind in relation to the relationships that you are building? It reflects confidence, and it's confidence, not arrogance. It's confidence. And confidence often we conflate with being extrovert, being gregarious. It isn't. You can be confident, you can be quietly confident. And so we'll talk about that as well. And prevents misunderstanding. So it's really important to think about how is it we put ourselves across, so that actually we put ourselves across in a way that we want people to appreciate who we are, what it is that we mean, what it is that we say, and that there isn't any misunderstanding about who we are and what we are about. So those are some of the things that are really important when thinking about business etiquette. And, why do we need to know any of this? Why do we need to know any of this stuff? This quote says, your manners and etiquette are not just actions, they're an attitude that is closely related to your self-confidence, your position in the organization, your personal life, as well as your ability to build successful relationships, teams, and organizations. So yes, everything is premised on relationships, but also we're in environments within the health service where actually we're all part of a team. There isn't one of us that isn't part of a team and part of a number of teams. And again, it's your ability to operate effectively within your close team as well as extended team. And there's something about, I always talk about visibility. And well, so what does that mean? Some might say, Jacynth, what does that mean, visibility? Sometimes I feel invisible. Visibility is about the footprint. What is the footprint that you leave? And so we can be visible for really good reasons. We can also be visible for not so good reasons. Yeah. And it's about how do we increase our visibility and maintain that visibility for good reasons. Yeah, we want people to remember who we are, remember what it is that we've done, remember our achievements, remember how we've made them feel. Yes, remember the outcome of. Yes, remember, to have a good experience of. All of these things are really important in our visibility. There is no point going for a job and saying, oh, well, I'm really friendly. When they say, well, what are the 3 things that you're going to say about yourself? Well, I'm really friendly. I get on with my team. And somebody's there thinking, but I've heard that you're really quite argumentative. Yeah, or that, perhaps you're not so much of a team player. That's the footprint that you've left. Yeah. So it's really important to think about it as a footprint, about how you raise your visibility and what's the footprint that you're going to be leaving. So I like to put it across in that manner. And so there are some basics in here of business etiquette, and I think as well. So in the chat, we've got something about leadership styles as well. Cultural intelligence, value of transparency, things about knowing who your audience is. Business etiquette with coordination and communication functions, with the role of emotional cohesion. Brilliant, all really brilliant things. These are some of the basics that I just want to explore today, and that obviously I would go into depth in a workshop. So notions around being on time, acknowledging your colleagues. So remember, I talked about relationships there, respect, shared spaces, dressing appropriately, building emotional intelligence, and to that I'd also like to add cultural intelligence and about preparation and how do we avoid distractions and the importance of that. So when meeting and greeting people, is the golden rule to treat others as you would be treated? Is it? Is it? Or are we actually going for the platinum rule, to treat others as they would like to be treated, which actually then starts to take account of the cultural nuances, remember, that I talked about. So what might be appropriate for you may not always be appropriate for others. And so I would urge you to go for the platinum rule around treating others as they would like to be treated. I want us to focus on meetings and boardroom etiquette. And I was never taught this in my kind of career journey to become a director. I'm also a non-executive director in the NHS, have been for 14 years, and I'm still learning because I make so many faux pas, and I might share some of those with you. But I'm still learning what is the correct way of being. But again, what I wanted to learn was what was the correct way of being whilst maintaining who I am, my authenticity, and what was unique about me, and what is different, what is my added value within that. So this is the platform that we're currently on. We are all absolutely used to Zoom, MS Teams, that, the last 2 years have really taught us that. And when you look at this and think about business etiquette, what do you see? One of the things that this platform does is it enhances every activity. So the individual at the top in the middle, who is perhaps laughing at a comment, looks like she's laughing uncontrollably. You've got an individual on the right-hand side and a gentleman there with glasses on who is very relaxed. Yeah. And you've got a couple of screens where actually the individual has disappeared. Each of these pictures is communicating something. Okay. And etiquette, there is an etiquette for use of the virtual platform that some people have mastered and some people have not mastered. So as an example, so in one of the board meetings that were held, one of the directors, so we all go on to mute and we're very used to that. And one of the directors, I couldn't work out whether he started to just laugh. And then he put his hand over his mouth and he was laughing. And we were talking about quite a serious subject. And I didn't know whether he was laughing at the comments, the contributions that were made, or actually whether he was having a separate conversation. Whatever it was highly inappropriate. And then we'd got another individual who then was in great disagreement, who was huffing and puffing. Again, we couldn't hear the huffing and puffing, but we could actually see the huffing and puffing. So when we come and talk about body language. But this was brilliant. I don't know if any of you saw this. I can see Lucy laughing, but I don't know if any of you saw this. It was on the news. It was in the newspapers. And this was a parish council meeting that descended into chaos. It was so funny, where the councillors started to trade insults off each other, insults towards each other. And, you know, people were muttering, unfortunately, obscenities under their breath. The actual chair of the meeting tried to bring the meeting to order. Things didn't improve. It quickly degenerated into nothing that we can call but chaos, with insults being traded and then actually an individual ultimately being ejected from the meeting, which is quite easy to do, isn't it? You just press the button and you can eject somebody. So that's virtual meetings. So when we think about in-person meetings, there isn't a button to press, so nobody's going to eject you for some of that perhaps poor behavior that we hope doesn't happen. But it's just to say that there is an etiquette on the virtual platform. And I think more and more of us are now moving back into the physical face-to-face meetings, but virtual meetings still exist. So I say that to say, just very quickly thinking about how everything is enhanced on a virtual platform. And so first impressions count. And we often hear the phrase that says, actually, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. You've made first impressions of me already, as I said. Partly may have been informed before from information sent. You may have done a Google search, you may have heard of me, and then that's been cemented from seeing me. So we've made that and can't change that first impression because that's it. But as it says, research has shown it can take as little as 1/10 of a second to make a judgment of another person. And when we think about this in relation to when we're going for our next job, yeah, a career move, it's really important to think about what is the impression that you want them to have of you from the outset. And that outset isn't necessarily when they see you. The outset is when you've made that decision and you start that application process. The outset for some of you may begin before that if you are, particularly when you're thinking about applying for internal positions, people have already got a view and opinion of you, haven't they? They've already had an encounter with you. We can't unforget stuff. Yes. If we've seen things, we've experienced things, we can't forget that. And so when we're thinking about first impressions, we have to think about, again, going back to our footprint, what is the impression that we want people to have of you? Okay, and the impression. We can change an impression. Yes, so please don't anybody think, oh my gosh, all is lost because I had a huge argument the other day with X, Y, and Z. Please don't think it is lost. We can change an impression. But I say this to say the importance of impressions throughout our personal and our career lives. So first impressions significantly predict employers' behavioral tendencies during job interviews, as well as their ultimate recruitment decisions. Yes, so decisions, unfortunately, will get made about you based on that first impression. And what some of the research and evidence says that actually, if my impression of you is good, then actually when I'm having a conversation with you, whether that be interview, but my interaction with you, I'm really going to be looking for all of those things that confirm my first impression. Oh, that was wonderful. Oh, yes, that was really good. Yeah. If my impression of you is not so good, equally, I'm going to be looking for all the stuff that confirms my first impression. Well, that wasn't very good. Well, that response, they could have perhaps made a little bit of an effort on. Yeah. So first impressions are crucially important. Yeah. It takes many good deeds to build a good reputation and only bad one to lose it. I often say, particularly in business, and in the work that I do, that I'm only as good as my last piece of work. I could have been absolutely brilliant last week, but actually I've had a bad interaction, a bad experience, a poor review from a client last week, and that could really damage my business and my career. Yes, so it takes lots of good stuff to build a reputation, but only one thing to lose it. So just to remember that. So meetings, I'm going to come on to meetings. So again, this is all based on things based on my experience of what I see and what I've learned and lessons. Arrive early. If it's a 10 o'clock meeting, tell me what time should you be there? If it's a 10 o'clock meeting, what time do you think you should arrive? Meeting starts at 10. Anybody going to put anything in the chat? 9:45, 9:55. Brilliant. Arrive early. Okay, and there are lots of reasons to arrive early. So don't assume the beginning of the meeting will be delayed, because if everybody's saying, well, it'll be delayed and we're going to start late, we're never going to start on time. Okay, it says if you arrive late, you risk missing valuable information and a chance. But again, it's first impressions. I went to a leaving do of somebody who was incredibly senior, and as part of this individual's parting shot, her line manager said, lovely person, brilliant, but always late. Now, who wants that on their epitaph? Who wants that in their leaving do, to be always late? So arrive early. Yes, it's about perception, but it also allows you to build relationships, to have offline conversations with people, to network, to meet new people, to catch up with individuals. So it's important to arrive early. Again, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. There's nothing worse than arriving later to a meeting and then trying to find somewhere to sit and get your papers out and gather yourself and get your drink, and thinking about how that may look. And yes, I appreciate there are times that you will be late. Be prepared to be present and nowhere else. This is so important. Everybody comes with laptops and all sorts of equipment nowadays. Everybody has their own. And when it's a virtual meeting, you know when somebody's doing their emails and doing other things, you can tell. But when it's a physical meeting as well, be prepared to be present, be in the room, try and minimize distractions, as many distractions, so that it's about being present in the room so that everybody can contribute, and that the perception of you is that you are listening, you're engaged, that you are interested, and that you are, but most of all as well, that you are ready to respond. There's nothing worse than being asked a question and you're thinking, oh, sorry, could you just repeat that, please? Because you've been distracted. And I think there's something about respecting other people's time as well that is really important. So be prepared to be present and think about your use of electronic items. And unless you're on call, please, one suggestion is don't even have your mobile phone on the desk, please, because you're tempted to look at it. The light comes on when the message comes, you get distracted. So minimize all distractions so that you are present. Acknowledge your colleagues. Yes, greet them appropriately. And the appropriateness is culturally nuanced as well. There are some, it used to be traditionally, they go in and they shake hands. It's culturally nuanced. So you begin to appreciate, who do you shake hands with? Who do you perhaps have a little bow of the head to, or just a cheery greeting that says hello and a smile? But there's something about how you greet people, and not to get into that habit of only greeting people that you know. Yeah, I've been in rooms where I don't know anybody and everybody seems to be talking with everybody else. Now, my Myers-Briggs is an I, so I'm, where my energy goes is inwards, so I'm an introvert. And so for me, although I've been called network queen, it's painful to have to constantly go up to people to say, hi, my name is, etc. And so we all have that responsibility in terms of how we engage, in terms of how we build relationships. But I think just a matter of, remember, manners, politeness, greet people. And what we don't want is the perception that there are cliques. Oh, it's that group of people together, again, having conversations and not involving others. So it's really important to think about, how do you acknowledge your colleagues, all of your colleagues in the room, irrespective of their role, their background, their responsibility. Just the point about saying hi, hello, my name is, and we've all got those, well, I haven't, but a number of people have got those badges now. Hello, my name is. Really, really important to think about that. So when you get there, where do you sit? If you've arrived early, you've got a choice. If you've arrived late, you have no choice in where you sit. And this is really interesting. So as I said, I'm an introvert. And although I've learned a lot of techniques now, so I'm better. So I'm an introvert, but where you sit may matter. So why does it matter? If you are used to speaking up, speaking out, and having your voice heard, it doesn't really matter where you sit. If it's a challenge for you to speak up and have your voice out, and this is not because you don't have anything to say, but because your preference is actually that you're quieter, that perhaps you're more reflective, then it could matter where you sit. So if, for example, I don't know, can you see my cursor? Yes, okay, Lucy's nodding. So if this individual here was the chairperson of the meeting, was chairing the meeting, and I'm quite quiet, finding it difficult to raise my voice, but I do have things to say, then the best place to sit would be across in one of these three positions, so that actually you're in there, the chairperson's line of sight. Okay, not next to them, because they tend not to look next, but in their line of sight. That way you can indicate by nodding, raising your hand, leaning forward, so that they can see actually that you want to come in, and they will say, oh, I notice, I noticed Sarah Jane wants to say something. Sarah, what would you like to say? And it gives you that space, okay? Because you will find, and as you begin to know and understand your Myers-Briggs a little bit more, you will find that those with a preference for extroversion have no problem in speaking up, and will often, and it becomes a little bit like a dance, and will often speak up quite frequently. And if you have a preference for introversion, it can sometimes be a little bit difficult to get in. So where you sit matters, can matter, I should say, can matter, but don't worry if those seats are filled. Yes, and we can talk about what, how then do you get your voice heard as well if you're somebody with a preference for introversion. So I could cover that at a later date. Martina's written, I've just noticed this. I was once told if you have nothing to say in a meeting, should you even attend? And that's an interesting point. I think what I would say then is every meeting has to have a clear purpose. Yes, there's a clear purpose, there are objectives, there's an outcome. And for you to think about, if you're invited to that meeting, why? The big question is why? Why have you been invited? What is it that and it's often about your role. Yes. So therefore, that should help you in thinking about your contributions. At all meetings, we should, remember I talked about visibility, think about how do we raise our visibility in a meeting? Because actually, if we consistently say nothing, then people will say, well, what's the point of inviting Sid? Because, you know, they never say anything, or they don't really have much to say, or well, I'm not quite sure what their views and points are. So I would encourage everybody to speak up at a meeting if they've been invited to a meeting. And then, of course, we can look at techniques around how you do this, because as I say, it's easier for some than for others, but it's not impossible. And there are techniques that I learned in order to raise my voice, raise my visibility, and have something to say at a meeting, even when I thought I had nothing to contribute. So thank you for raising that, Martine, because I'm sure a number of people are perhaps thinking about that. So be prepared. This should be quite a simple tip, but it's amazing the amount of people that are not prepared, that come to meetings or go to meetings and have not read their papers, or have only read or have knowledge of the paper that they've written or that they're going to contribute to. It's really important to read your papers. There are techniques to learn. So as a non-exec, we have board meetings of 300 and odd papers. There's absolutely no way I can read 300 and odd pages within 1 week and read word for word. So there are tips and techniques around how you read board papers and how you actually get the essence out of a board paper, and then start to decipher and think, so where do I want to contribute? Where do I want to add value? What are the questions that I might want to ask? And make yourself some notes or some bullet points that you take into that meeting so you are prepared. If you're presenting, then present with knowledge and authority. And I'm sure if you've not been on, you'll all know some tips around presenting. But it's really important when you're at meetings is to present. I was once told one of the huge tips that I had that was so impactful for me was to think and speak bullet points. Yeah, so what we don't want is a long story, a verbatim story. What are the key points that you want to raise? And be prepared to answer questions. And more importantly as well, know who's in the room, because then you begin to know what the questions might be and where the challenges might be. Etiquette of dressing. So what you wear and how you look at work, does it really matter? And this is where it's interesting. So somebody put age in there earlier, and some of the research and evidence will show a difference according to the generation. Yes, so that's what the evidence will say. So, and I'm not meaning to stereotype. So, for example, some of the older generation, the baby boomers, that's me, will will have a preference perhaps more for kind of the suit and the shirt, the suit and tie, the more formal structure. Whereas the millennials, Gen X, will actually have a preference for what they call business casual. Okay, but the point is you need to understand what is the culture, what is the culture within your organization? What are the norms of dress within your organization? Appreciate when you have a uniform on, you have a uniform on, but even there are differences in some people's uniform dressing than others. But really to start to think about, does it matter? The answer is yes, it does matter, because it goes back to that first impression. It goes back to the footprint, okay? The dressing sense of a person speaks volumes about you. It says personally and professionally. The truth is, clothes do talk. Clothes do communicate. Yes, and we know that when you look on the television, and you can see how clothes will communicate. Clothes say things about different people, and so again, it's about what is it you want your dress sense to communicate about you. Thinking about body language and about what message are you conveying. So I showed you at the beginning a picture of a Zoom presentation, and here's another one. And the researchers suggested that between 60 and 70% of all meaning is derived from non-verbal behavior. We often think it's about what we say. And we will think it's about what we say, but it isn't. As it says, it takes 30 seconds to make an impact, a tenth of a second. It will vary, but basically it doesn't take very long. So your image and how you use it is central to others' perceptions of your abilities, skills, and potential. So even before you've said, I'm good at this, I've achieved that, remember, first impressions, they've started to form a perception of you. Will they be able to present? Will they be able to negotiate with? Will they be able to influence? They're starting to think about all of those things based on their first impressions, based on the way we say hello, based on the way that we greet. Yeah, some of those things. So it's amazing how quickly you can make an impression on others and of others equally. And so we all know and have seen this about communication. About communication with body language. 50% of how we communicate is nonverbal, is our body language, the way we look and the way we use our body. 35% is our voice. That's the tonality, the way we use it. Is it exciting? Is it engaging? Is it kind of monotonous and drone, etc.? It's about our voice. When we convey, I could have said, hello, everybody. I'm really pleased that I'm here today. Oh gosh, I just couldn't have been anywhere else. How believable would that have been? So there's something about the tonality of our voice, and then it's what we say. It's only 7% on what we say. So imagine that. And often we focus so much on getting it right. What are we going to say? And we don't do any preparation about how we're going to look, our body language, and actually how we're going to engage and use our voice. So this is incredibly important in terms of, and to do this in an authentic way as well. Yes. To do this authentically as well is really important. So we're not mimicking somebody else's body language. We're not mimicking somebody else's voice. And one of the things I do want to say very quickly is your accent doesn't matter. Yeah. So some people, somebody said to me today, oh, you haven't got a Brummie accent. Yeah. At times, and it may have come out here, it comes out now and again. If it does, it does. Your accent doesn't matter. Okay. We're more focused on, can we hear you? Is there some clarity around that? And what you're saying. So I'm really conscious. Culture informs your communication. So remember how we are socialized, the areas that we live in, how we grew up, our culture, our traditions will inform the way that we communicate. Okay. And so we are mindful about that for ourselves and mindful about that for our interactions with others. So this is where cultural competence comes in, and thinking about how culturally competent are you in terms of understanding some of those nuances and what it means for the way that you not only behave, but the way that you practice personally and professionally. So it's really important when we're thinking about emotional intelligence, which was raised in cultural intelligence, that we become more self-aware and recognize our own emotions. A manager once told me, actually, when I was an assistant director of nursing, my boss said to me, Jacynth, you really need to learn to fix that face of yours. And I went, oh, and she said, because I can tell when you disagree, when you're not happy. She said, your face is an absolute picture. So I had to learn to be more self-aware, and I've learned to try and hide those. And I'm going to put my hand up. There have been times online, and I've been absolutely livid. I've had to turn the camera off just for a few minutes to compose myself, and then come back and smile. So we need to be more self-aware and think about how we not only recognize our emotions, but how we manage those emotions. We need to think about how we improve our interpersonal and our social skills to inspire, influence, and connect with others. Remember, everything we do is premised on relationships. Yes, there's somebody else in that, somebody else involved, and think about our social skills with individuals, but also with larger groups. Become more empathic, practice stepping into another person's shoes and understanding how they feel. I work with organizations a lot around equality, and I talk about organizational culture, and I say to people, re-enter your team or your organization in another person's shoes. And that is thinking about protected characteristics. What would it be like to work in your organization, in your team, from a different protected characteristic? So that then we begin to build that empathy. Okay, so cultural intelligence is the ability to relate and work effectively across cultures. And so it's to what extent you're able to do that. So those who have mastered etiquette, who are entirely impeccably right, would seem to arrive at a point of exquisite dullness. So it's not about, yes, this is the absolute way of doing it, because you have to put some of yourself in there, authentic, what is unique to you in the way that you do things. And I leave you with this one because it's my absolute favorite. And I learned that people forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I'm going to stop there.
Oh, Jacynth, amazing. I'm quickly writing away, so looking down, just in case you didn't think I was listening, I was writing away, making lots of comments. Incredible, thank you so much. I've learned an awful lot. I'm pretty sure from the smiles in the audience they have too. So we've got about 10 minutes for questions. There's a lot of comments in the chat box. Has anybody wanted to ask Jacynth any questions, query any of her points, or any comments at all? If you feel comfortable, or pop it in the chat box if you don't feel comfortable, I can ask on your behalf. Lots of really great learnings, Jacynth, really great learnings. There's a question.
Oh. Sorry, Lucy, there's a lovely comment from Sarah in here. The whole one kiss or two dilemma in social situations has ended with COVID. No one is kissing, so no one feels awkward about it. I love that.
That's very true. I've been caught in that situation. You're never quite sure when you're supposed to stop kissing. It's a bit awkward, isn't it? Good point, really good point. There's a question about handshakes, so handshakings. That'd be quite interesting to explore, Jacynth.
Yeah.
That's from Sarah as well.
There are some people who are comfortable with handshakes and some people that aren't. If you know somebody is comfortable with handshake because you've either seen them handshake or you have before, then my thing is about, if you're going to handshake, do a proper handshake. No, what I call limp lettuce handshakes. Because again, people have perceptions. It's incredibly interesting how people can form an opinion based just on your handshake. And so the best way is with your hands, I call it kind of web to web. You go into somebody's handshake, you go right to the web of their hand, so that you're holding their hand, and that you kind of shake. Please don't hold it too tight so that all of the blood drains out of their hand, but equally don't hold it too loosely, because then there's the perception, and the perceptions will be that they're not confident. It's really interesting, people's perceptions of you based on the handshake. So if you're going to, then do it correctly. If you're not, that's fine. There is no written rule that says you have to handshake. If somebody extends their hand and you're uncomfortable, please don't feel you have to handshake with them. Don't worry. Often it's just a nod and a smile. Yes, it's an acknowledgement, and a nod and a smile will absolutely do. And so you begin to understand different practices, and some of that is culturally nuanced as well. But again, don't assume, yes, that it's culturally nuanced. Okay.
Thank you. Really great tips. Oh, Katrina. Hi, Katrina. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question because I think I'm an I probably most of the time if I can be in my natural setting, but depending on the context of where I am, I have to be an E.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about what you said, Jacynth, about that first impression piece. And so sometimes I'll hesitate if I'm in an area where I feel like I'm sort of the junior person, and I may miss my opportunity to give that good first impression because I'm not sure what's expected of me and what the permissions are, and I guess it's the bit more around what the purpose of that meeting is and who's going to take the lead. So how can we manage that?
And thank you, Katrina. That's a really, really good question. And that comes back to the notion of preparation. So often we kind of pick up our papers and we've gone to the next meeting without considering and without preparing, going back to purpose of meeting, why you were there specifically, okay? And what is it that your role is able to contribute to that? Okay, so that kind of gives you some of the permission to speak. Being really clear about who's in the room, thinking about either the agenda item that you're asked to speak to, or one of the things that I say is we all have an agenda, or should have an agenda beforehand. Have a look down the agenda, make yourself some notes and decide where is it that you want to contribute. I say to myself, what must I do? Having left that meeting, what do I think I need to have done? Yes. What conversation must I have had? Then what could I do, and what don't I want to bother to do? So I almost challenge myself. So excuse me one second, so I can hear the banging.
Joys of working from home.
My apologies, working from home.
Problem.
So I always make myself notes on the agenda, but I challenge myself. And sometimes it's painful. Being an introvert I can say to you, is painful. Katrina's nodding her head. It is incredibly painful. You're sitting there thinking, I know I should speak. Either I can't get in, I don't know what to say. So that's why prepare beforehand, make your bullet points, decide which agenda item you're going to speak on. If you've arrived early, you can actually say to the chair, I'd like to speak to this item, and the chair can bring you in. Remember, think about where you sit, raise your hand, nod, lean forward. Okay, so think about those tips. I even, and I wrote a short article about this, I even do the count to 3 and then go for it. Literally. And if you're an introvert, you'll understand that. So internally, I'm kind of counting to 3 and then go for it.
I think I struggle when we go to meetings without agendas. I think when it's an open forum, and I wonder if that's similar for people in the teams I work with, and whether I could help them with agendas more.
Absolutely. And if it is, and if you find yourself in that situation, then try and just kind of say, well, what are the themes that are being discussed here? What am I getting from there? And then how can I contribute to that? And sometimes it might just be, you know, I've heard Christine talk about X, Y, and Z. I really wanted to support what she's saying because X, Y, and Z. Okay.
Really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks both. Thank you. I think we've got another question from Anne Meadows. Says Anne, how do you deal with not being able to get your pointer? I think you gave some really good tips there, but is there anything else you wanted to add? Oh, Anne, if you're happy to ask on your behalf, please.
So can use, hi Anne, I can see you now.
Hi Anne, yeah, that's just...
So if an agenda item goes by and you've not been able to get your point across and the meeting's continued, there's often an AOB, and I know people like things to be notified beforehand, but at that point you can say, you know, on that agenda item, I appreciate it's closed. However, there was a point I just wanted to raise. Yeah. And bring it in that way. If you've absolutely left that meeting and think I've missed a point or whatever else, then write an email and send it to either the individual and the chair, or, you know, send it to the appropriate person. And remember, there's an etiquette around emails as well.
Oh, Jacynth, I'm sorry, we've run out of time, unfortunately. Thank you so much. Just to pull some comments from the chat, fabulous tips. Thank you so much. An eye-opener, light bulb moments. And I think it's been a really valuable session. I'm sure when people catch up on YouTube later as well, they'll find it really valuable. So thank you all for your contributions. I have learned an awful lot. Thank you so much. So just to remind you, we've recorded today, so please do share it with your colleagues. I think there's such a valuable webinar, so many tricks and tips to help us all. The next webinar is in a couple of weeks' time, so do please keep an eye out. I'm really excited to update you that we will be starting a global webinar series. So we've got Thet joining us for our first in that series in a couple of weeks' time. So we look forward to welcoming you to that. So we're welcoming out to a global audience, which is nice to see some people from China today as well. Please do keep in touch. Let us know what topics you would like to hear from, obviously from a leadership development perspective, and we're happy to kind of approach different speakers and get them to come along with their expertise and experience, just like Jacynth. Jacynth, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to welcome you today. Thanks for all your help and support. Have a great day, everybody, and hope you see you everybody. Take care.
Thank you. It's been great.
Thanks, Arabella. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining. Take care.